Every single day, thousands of people pay property taxes on land they barely use. They write checks to counties that tell them what they can build, what color it has to be, and what permits they need just to exist on their own dirt. And most of them have no idea there's a completely legal way to opt out of almost all of it. How tall it can be. What you're looking at right now changed everything for me. A corrugated steel arch, a wood stove burning hot enough to keep a man warm in a blizzard, a dog sitting on a rubber mat while snow piles up on the roof outside, and underneath all of it, a trailer chassis with 2 wheels. That's it. That's the whole secret. When a structure sits on wheels, the law sees it differently. Not a building, not real property. In most U.S. states and dozens of countries, it becomes a vehicle, a mobile unit. And vehicles don't get taxed the same way land does. Vehicles don't need building permits. Vehicles don't require county approval before you put wood stove inside them. This one legal distinction has been quietly exploited by a small group of builders who figure out that you can live, really live, in a Quonset hut on wheels for a fraction of what most people spend on a shed. And almost nobody is talking about it. Today we're going to change that. I found 5 of these builds. Real ones, with real costs, real specs, and real people who made them work. By the time this video ends, you're going to know exactly how this works, exactly what it costs, and exactly why mainstream tiny home culture has been sleeping on the best alternative housing option available right now. Let's start at the beginning, because if you've never heard the word Quonset before, you need to understand what you're actually looking at. During World War II, the U.S. military needed a shelter they could ship anywhere on Earth, assemble with untrained soldiers in a matter of hours, and abandon without guilt if they had to retreat. They called it the Quonset hut, named after the Rhode Island base where it was first manufactured. The design is almost embarrassingly simple. A semicircular arch made from corrugated steel. Open ends. No internal load-bearing walls needed because the arch itself carries all the structural stress. Engineers loved it. Soldiers lived in them from the Pacific Islands to the Arctic. After the war, millions of these structures were sold as surplus. Farmers use them. Mechanics use them. Small businesses use them. And a few very clever people looked at the design and realized something the military never intended. If you shrink it down and bolt it to a trailer, it becomes one of the most weather-resistant, structurally sound, and legally ambiguous mobile shelters ever created. The arch shape is not just aesthetically interesting. It's physics. Snow loads slide off. Wind wraps around rather than pushing flat against the wall. Rain channels instantly to the sides. There are no flat roof panels to leak, no corners to collect stress fractures. The corrugated steel skin flexes slightly under pressure and returns to shape. These structures have survived tornadoes, blizzards, and decades of neglect and kept standing while conventional cabins collapse around them. When you put one on a heavy-duty trailer chassis, you get all of that structural toughness in a package that you can pull with a 3/4-ton pickup truck. Now here's the part that most people in the tiny home space have never properly explained. So pay close attention because this is where it gets genuinely valuable. In the United States, the legal classification of a structure determines almost everything about how it's taxed, permitted, and regulated. A structure with a permanent foundation is real property. It gets assessed. It gets taxed annually. It requires building permits before construction. It must comply with local zoning. It needs inspections. It becomes part of the county record. This is the world most homeowners live in. But a structure that is titled as a vehicle, that sits on a registered trailer, is personal property in the eyes of most jurisdictions. You pay a one-time or annual registration fee, similar to your car. You do not pay the county an assessment based on square footage and estimated value every single year for the rest of your life. In states like Texas, Tennessee, Montana, South Dakota, and New Mexico, this distinction is particularly powerful. These states have either very favorable titling laws for trailer-mounted structures, very weak zoning enforcement in rural counties, or both. The key difference between a Quonset on wheels and a standard tiny house on wheels comes down to construction method and registration pathway. A traditional tiny house on wheels is built like a house. Stick framing, house wrap, siding, shingles. Because it looks like a house and is built like a house, many counties now regulate it like a house, even if it has wheels. Some jurisdictions now require THOW dwellers to connect to utilities, meet minimum square footage requirements, and pay property assessments anyway. A Quonset on wheels is registered differently because it's built from a trailer chassis up using commercial steel panels, not residential construction materials. It doesn't look like a house. It looks like equipment, agricultural equipment, industrial storage, commercial shelter. That classification matters enormously in rural counties where equipment trailers are parked on private land every single day without anyone asking questions. That said, and I want to be very direct about this, you must check your specific county before you act on anything you hear in this video. Some counties in California, Oregon, and Washington have specifically updated their codes in the last 2 years to close what they call the trailer loophole. A small number of other counties are in the process of doing this right now in 2026. The window is not closing everywhere, but it is closing in some places, which means now is the time to move if this is something you're serious about. Let's talk about the 5 builds I found, because this is where things get real. The first build is the one that probably looks closest to what you saw in this video's thumbnail. A guy in rural Tennessee built it as a hunting camp. He started with a 16-foot bumper pull utility trailer rated at 7,000 pounds. On top of that chassis, he installed a prefabricated Quonset arch kit, the type typically sold for agricultural storage, cut down to fit the trailer width. Total arch length was 14 feet. Width was 8 feet. Interior ceiling height at the peak hit just over 6 feet. He welded the arch sections directly to the trailer frame, added a wood frame front wall with a single door, and cut a flue hole in the arch for a small cast ironwood stove. Insulation was 2 inches of closed-cell spray foam applied directly to the inside of the steel arch. No condensation problems since. No permit was required in his county for the construction. Total cost, including the used trailer he bought for $1,100, just under $6,000. He uses it 8 weekends a year for deer season and loans it to friends the rest of the time. It has sat in the same field for 3 years. He has received no tax assessment and no county correspondence of any kind. The second build pushed the concept further. A machinist in Montana wanted a mobile workshop he could take to remote job sites. He sourced a 20-foot gooseneck trailer and built a Quonset arch with an interior width of 10 feet, wide enough to fit a truck inside if he opened both end walls. He insulated with rigid polyiso board cut to fit the curved interior, then cover it with thin plywood for a finished wall surface. He ran a small propane heater rather than a wood stove because he needed more control over interior temperature for precision work. He added a single 200-watt solar panel on the south-facing arch curve with battery bank for LED lighting and phone charging. His total cost landed at just over $14,000, including the trailer, materials, propane system, and solar. He's driven it 1,100 miles across Montana on 2 separate occasions. Registration and title are processed through the state as a utility trailer. 0 property tax involvement. The third build is the one that will either excite you or terrify you, depending on your comfort level. A couple in New Mexico decided to make this their full-time primary residence. They built on a 24-foot trailer, giving them a living space comparable to a small studio apartment. They divided the interior into distinct zones using furniture and curtains rather than walls, a sleeping area at the rear, a kitchen galley along one side, a sitting area near the front door. They installed a composting toilet, a 12-volt water pump pulling from a 40-gallon tank, and a small wood stove for primary heat, with a propane 2-burner cooktop for cooking. Their solar system is more serious. 4 panels mounted on a custom rail system along the arch, a 200-amp-hour lithium battery bank, and an inverter for a small laptop and phone charging. They park on 5 acres of land they lease for $200 a month from a neighboring rancher. Their total housing cost, including lease, propane, and occasional maintenance, is under $400 a month. Their build cost $19,000. They have lived there for 14 months. The fourth build is the most raw and the most inspiring if you're working with a tight budget. A 23-year-old in rural Texas built his first shelter entirely from salvage. He found a damaged flatbed trailer in auction for $400, repaired the frame himself, and sourced used corrugated steel roofing panels from a demolished agricultural building. He bent the panels into approximate arches using a rented sheet metal roller at a local fabrication shop. 3 hours of rental time for $60. The result is not a perfect semicircle. It leans slightly to one side, and the front wall is a patchwork of different gauge steel, but it is completely weathertight, structurally stable, and has survived 2 Texas hailstorms with 0 damage. He insulated with salvaged spray foam offcuts from a construction site and uses a small wood stove he found roadside with a cracked door, which he welded shut himself. His total investment was under $2,000. He lives in part-time while saving money. He describes it as the best financial decision he has ever made. The 5th build is where the concept intersects with income. A man in Tennessee built a Quonset on wheels specifically to rent on a glamping platform. He invested more heavily in aesthetics, a sliding barn door at the front, a polished concrete-look floor coating, a modern soapstone style with stove, and string lighting along the interior arch. He added a small outdoor deck that folds down from the trailer frame and a canvas canopy that extends from the front opening. His build cost was just under $22,000, including all finishing touches. He parks it on his own land, which he owns outright. In his first 12 months operating it as a short-term rental, he generated over $31,000 in booking revenue. His occupancy rate peaked at 73% in summer. He is currently building a second unit. Now let's talk about why these builds are not more common, because the title of this video is not clickbait. These genuinely are undervalued and underbuilt. There are a few reasons. First, Quonset arch kits are not widely marketed to individuals. They are sold primarily to farmers, ranchers, and small industrial operations. The companies that manufacture them don't run YouTube ads. They don't have Instagram aesthetics. They ship pallets of steel panels to rural addresses, and that's the end of the customer relationship. Most people in the alternative housing space have simply never encountered them because they exist in a different commercial universe than the tiny home builders and van conversion shops that dominate social media. Second, the builds look industrial. The corrugated steel exterior reads as agricultural to most people. It doesn't photograph the way a cedar-clad tiny house does. It doesn't show up on architecture blogs. The people who build them are not typically the type to post content about them, in part because publicizing a tax-advantaged living arrangement tends to invite scrutiny you'd rather avoid. Third, the knowledge is fragmented. There's no centralized community, no standard build guide. Every builder figures it out independently, often making the same mistakes. Underestimating insulation needs, misjudging trailer weight ratings, overlooking the importance of a proper moisture barrier between the spray foam and the steel. This video exists to start correcting that knowledge gap. Now, let's get into the practical cost reality, because I want to give you a real number you can actually work with. The lowest viable build, functional, weathertight, legally mobile, will cost you somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000 if you source a used trailer and do all labor yourself. That number assumes a trailer in the 12 to 16 foot range, a prefabricated arch kit or salvaged steel panels, 2 inches of spray foam insulation, a basic with stove and flue, a simple front wall with a door and no electrical or plumbing. This is a hunting camp, a weekend retreat, a temporary housing solution, while you build something more permanent. A mid-range build, the kind with solar lighting, a small water system, comfortable insulation, a finished interior surface, and a quality wood stove, will run between $12,000 and $18,000. This is where most serious builders land. It's the sweet spot between cost and livability. A premium build, the kind designed for full-time habitation or short-term rental income, ranges from $18,000 to $25,000 depending on finish level, solar capacity, and whether you're paying for labor or doing everything yourself. Compare that to a conventional tiny house on wheels, which now averages between $45,000 and $90,000 from professional builders, or a traditional home purchase, which in most U.S. markets requires a down payment alone that exceeds the cost of a finished Quonset build. The math is not subtle. On the off-grid side, the arched roof of a Quonset is actually one of the better solar mounting surfaces available in alternative housing. The curvature allows panels to be tilted toward the south at an angle that varies across the arch, so you can position them for optimal seasonal performance without additional mounting hardware. A modest system, 2 to 4 panels, a lithium battery bank in the 100 to 200 amp hour range, a charge controller, and an inverter will handle LED lighting, phone and laptop charging, a 12-volt water pump, and a small fan. Add a wood stove for heat and a propane 2-burner for cooking, and you have a genuinely functional off-grid setup for under $3,000 in additional equipment costs. Water is simpler than most people expect. A 40 to 60-gallon tank mounted under the trailer frame, a 12-volt pump, and a small on-demand propane water heater gives you running water anywhere you park. Many builders add a basic gravity-fed rainwater collection system from the arch. The curved surface channels rain effectively to the sides as a supplemental source for non-potable uses. If you're ready to find one of these or start building one, here's exactly where to look. Search Facebook Marketplace using terms like Quonset trailer, arch shelter trailer, military surplus shelter, and corrugated steel trailer shelter. New listings appear weekly and prices vary enormously based on seller knowledge. Some people have no idea what they have. Craigslist farm and garden sections in rural states consistently surface used arch kits and agricultural shelters that can be adapted for new arch kits. Search manufacturers that supply the agricultural market directly. Steelmaster Buildings, Pioneer Steel, and Bell & Country all sell panel systems that can be adapted to trailer mounting with basic fabrication skills. For trailer chassis, look at equipment auctions, salvage yards, and online auction platforms that specialize in agricultural equipment. A used gooseneck or bumper pull in good structural condition is worth far more than its auction price when you consider what you're going to build on it. And before you do any of this, before you spend a single dollar, call your county assessor's office, not the planning department. The assessor asks specifically how a trailer-mounted steel structure is classified for tax purposes in your county. Ask whether a structure registered as a trailer entitled as a vehicle would be subject to real property assessment. Get the answer in writing if you can. Most counties will tell you plainly that a titled vehicle is not real property, but some have changed their position. You need to know which category yours falls into before you commit. The tax-free status of these builds is real. It's been leveraged by thousands of people across the country for years. But it is not guaranteed everywhere, and it is not permanent. The more visible this lifestyle becomes, the more pressure local governments will face to regulate it. The people who act now, who find their land, register their trailer, and establish their legal classification before county codes are updated, are the ones who will grandfather into protection that new builders may not be able to access. The man in that thumbnail image standing in a blizzard with a hot drink in his hand, his dog at his feet, a wood stove roaring behind him, snow piling on a steel arch that doesn't care what the weather does. He figured this out. He's warm. He's not paying a property tax bill. He's not waiting on a building permit. He built something real with his hands for less money than most people spend on a used car, and he parked in the woods and made it home. 5 builds. Real costs. Legal reality. Everything you need to decide if this is the move you've been looking for. If this video gave you something genuinely useful, subscribe and keep watching, because this is only the beginning of what we're covering this year.